Yo, what's up gamers? Real Alpha Gamer here, guys. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, comment. So gamers, I've never been this close to getting the Parallel Worlds all records, world record in all dungeons as I was last night. This run was completely nuts. So I actually did 2 runs yesterday. They both PB'd, which is great, but neither one of them were anything what I wanted. Guys, I was practicing Parallel Worlds all yesterday and the day before, and I seriously leveled up. In fact, I'm gonna get the world record tomorrow, almost guaranteed. Gamers, before we get into the runs I reviewed today, I wanted to talk about exactly what I'm doing in Parallel Worlds and the different categories and how the different categories are different in their own ways. So there's 4 different categories on speedrun.com for Parallel Worlds. There's all dungeons, there's light rolled all dungeons, there's any percent, and there's 100%. Recently, I got the world record in any percent category. I got a 108.41, and right now I'm working on the all dungeons category, and I'm trying to get below a 201.22. I think my ultimate goal in that is going to be a 159 though, because based on the runs I did today, I can get about a 155. So let's just go for a 159. Light World isn't really even a category. The rules for Light World on speedrun.com are actually Light World all dungeons, which is basically just the all dungeons category, except you can skip bottle and net a little bit easier. It's basically the same category, so I'm not really sure why Light World all dungeons is on here and it's mislabeled as Light World. Either way, nobody's actually running this. We're gonna get the world record in this anyway. 100% is another category. Wow, it actually makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad it's on here. There's only been 1 run of it done, and the guy who ran it, Canis, he's not actually very well versed in Link to the Past like me, so beating this time I don't think it will be very difficult. So what that means, after I get the all dungeons world record, I'm going to basically be at my goal of getting the Parallel Worlds world record, and we're going to move on to the next game, because again, we're trying to get every world record in the Link to the Past universe. Now, as I was saying earlier, I think getting the all dungeons world record is actually going to happen today, the day of me making this video. I'm going to stream later in about 5 or 6 hours, and I think I'm going to be able to get the world records in all dungeons literally today, because the practice I did yesterday was game-changing. It completely shook my understanding of how good I was at Parallel Worlds. I'm way better at it than I previously thought. Anyway, between all dungeons and any percent, the 2 main categories right now, any percent skips most of the dungeons. You just get what you need required for to beat the game, and then you beat the game. So it ends up being about an hour. All dungeons, you actually have to specifically beat the dungeons. You don't need to beat the dungeons in the main game, as beating the dungeons doesn't really do anything anyway. So that's why there's an all dungeons category. It is not a true any percent category. It's more a for fun, let's play the game category. I've been playing it. I don't think it's much more difficult than any percent, but you do a lot more of the game, which is a lot cooler. At any rate, guys, let's get into this video and review the 2 runs I did today, both of which PB'd. So this run started off pretty good. I did 2 runs today, and they actually both PB'd. So this run is a PB, but the beginning of the run is pretty funny, and it kind of jumped at me a big point. I can definitely get world record in this category, and this is the last serious category for Parallel Worlds, so pretty happy about my growth in Parallel Worlds. Unfortunately, on this run, I made a mistake on the next boss fight. You have to do Armos and then Mothula in this dungeon. So I've been trying to speed up this Mothula fight lately, and I made a huge error on Mothula here. And once you damage him, sometimes he goes back up. And that's actually why I died, because it's really hard to react to that if he goes directly up. You kind of have to predict it. I wasn't able to do that and I actually died there. So when you die on Mothula, you actually have to redo the Armos fight, which means this death is about 2 minutes. On the Mothula refight, I actually made a pretty similar error. I accidentally died on Mothula too, which is pretty unfortunate. So that was 2 deaths on Mothula, and they're 2 minutes per death. So literally 25 minutes into this run, I'm plus 4 minutes on my PB. The thing is, with this run though, I don't want to start over. I don't really want to do the first 20 minutes of this run. It's a lot of walking in a straight line. It's not very fun or exciting. And since I can PB by 20 minutes, why would I reset on a 4-minute time loss? Unfortunately, going into Din's Catacombs, I made another really critical error, and I died on the in the torch room in Din's Catacombs. So the first time I died, I kind of got choked out by the hand. So this time I made sure to make the hand drop on the right room. That way I won't get choked out. I purposely killed that Molorm because he's pretty annoying. And I actually died again, which is pretty funny, but I realized why I died. It's because I was going for the top left torch, and in that room, if you go for the top left torch, the mummy's always going to go left, and so it's kind of dangerous. The third time around, I still killed the Moldarm because I think it's worth it to kill that guy, but I went to the right side because the mummies aren't there. And then by the time I'm on the left side, there's no mummies nearby, and I actually live. The Moldarm fight was really good too, and I learned this recently. Moldarm actually you can damage before he uncoils initially at the fight. So right here, Molarm's active and I can do full damage to him, which is really cool. After that, you have to wait for his tail to uncoil before you damage him. So I have to intentionally wait here before I can get a hammer hit. This is something that I discovered recently and actually makes these Molarm fights a little bit faster and easier. So that's really cool. At the end of it all, I was plus 6 minutes and 54 seconds, which is crazy. That's a 7-minute time loss. We can even just say 6.5 minutes because my PB before this was pretty good in the beginning. The third dungeon was really good. I made it all the way through the Sky Isle without dying, which is huge. This room, you have to do with 2 hearts. You actually always take damage in the previous room. You always take 2 hearts of damage. So no matter what, you have 2 hearts here. There's 1 heart pot in this whole section. The other problem with this section is if you die anywhere in this section, you have to redo the entire dungeon because you need to hit this switch. So if you die, that switch will go back to being red, and then you have to come back and hit that switch. There are no other switches. So it's pretty big to not die here. It's very important. I do have a fairy, but even if I die with the fairy, it's risky, and I have to get another fairy, which ends up losing a lot of time. So doing this without dying was huge. I ended up getting a pretty good gold split, and then Draeger's Castle was actually also gold. My item collection split was gold too. I was plus 54 seconds on my PB, which is really cool because I was plus 654 earlier, which means I saved 6 minutes already. Also, if you notice, I'm only plus 4.5 minutes on world record, and I saved 6 minutes. I lost 6 minutes earlier, 7 minutes actually, which means I probably could have been pretty far ahead of the world record, which to me, based on how this run went, and then my next PB went as well, I can definitely get world record. Now guys, we're going to the Rauru's Ruins, the first Dark World dungeon. This is a dungeon you don't do in the any percent category, and the very beginning of this dungeon, you get a Helmholtzer fight that's insanely hard. Like, this is probably the hardest boss fight. Number 1, if he goes to the bottom, you can't actually damage him from the bottom. You have to damage him from the side, which is really risky and difficult. Also, if he ever does his tail when he's at the bottom, you have to pull the Cane of Burna out. Like, you have to get hit unless you have the Cane of Burna. So this fight is insanely RNG dependent, and it's very risky if you get bad RNG. On the bright side, once his mask is gone, you can actually just use the Cane of Burna and basically kill him with no risk and no worry whatsoever. So you're going to see me do that right here. Yeah, this fight's completely trivial once the Cane of Burna's gone. And I noticed there's a trend of that on all of the Parallel Worlds bosses. Pretty much every boss you can just use a Cane of Burna on and dash through and they're all dead. Which makes this game, the all dungeons part of this game, actually pretty easy. Like, it's difficult. I think if it was more optimized, but it's pretty safe for most of it, and it's pretty easy for most of it. One cool thing about Rauru's Ruins are these next 2 screens coming up. Yeah, this screen you can light that torch to see the path, but you can also do it blind using the text at the bottom, so that one's pretty cool. And then also you can hover this, so you don't have to hover this. You're supposed to navigate the path blindfolded, and it's a mirror of the previous room, but you can just hover it, which I don't even know if that's quicker, but it's cooler. The boss is just Argus with Master Sword, so it's pretty trivial. After this, I ended up being minus 12, so I'm actually ahead of my PB after the first dungeon when I lost 7 minutes on my PB. Okay, yeah, I can PB by a lot. Okay, guys, we're going into the second Dark World dungeon, and I actually really like Saria's Gardens. The first screen is this gigantic maze with these Beamos, and I actually think casually this is pretty difficult because you don't know where to go. These guys are constantly damaging you, and it's a pretty big maze. But in the speedrun, we can just dash through the entire thing, so it ends up being kind of trivial. This dungeon, I would think is the coolest dungeon design because it actually is kind of difficult. You have to manage both your magic and your hearts throughout the entire dungeon. I was saying earlier how most of the dungeons in Dark World are actually really easy because the bosses are trivial and you can just abuse the Cane of Burna. You can't actually abuse the Cane of Burna in this dungeon because these blocks, you have to use the Cane of Burna before picking up the block. Otherwise, this turret have a pretty good chance of knocking you before you hit them, and then you only have 6 hearts, so you actually lose a lot of hearts. So this dungeon, it's actually, you have to manage your hearts and your magic. You can't just abuse the Cane of Burna, and that's why I think it's actually really cool. And it might be easier as I get better at the game, but at a beginner level, it's pretty challenging. Yeah, as this dungeon goes on, you can look at my magic meter, and you have less and less magic as it goes on. There's this really cool bomb kill in this room where you need to bomb this wall, and then the bomb will actually kill the guy, blow the key up, and then you can get the key on the way back. You can also do this deboost over the spikes. This saves a ton of time, so I like doing it. But it might be kind of a mistake because, again, you do need to manage both your hearts and your magic. Also, we're at one of the coolest bomb skip parts of the run. So you can actually throw a bomb through this. In order to do it, you need to place 2 bombs, pick up one of them, throw the bomb, and then pick up the another one immediately after, and don't throw it. So right here, what happens is the bomb actually, for some reason, glitches through those giant bars. This is not intended. I think you're supposed to use the boomerang for this. I'm not actually sure because I tried doing this without this and without the boomerang, and I was like completely confused. So I think you're supposed to use the boomerang for this. But this bomb skip is pretty nice and saves quite a bit of time. At this point, you can notice I have 2 hearts and almost no magic, and I have to do this screen with a cane of burna. I almost got hit right there. That's kind of why you have to manage both your hearts and your magic. So on this screen, near the end of the run, there's both of these guys attacking you. And you actually fortunately get 2 magic pots. Now these magic pots are enough magic to always kill the boss. So at this point, after this screen, your run is 100% safe. And we're going to go into the boss to show you guys pretty much what every Parallel Worlds boss is. So in this game, it's blind. And you can tell right here, I actually go for a damage hit, but then I just pull the Cane of Burna out, and that ends up being all the bosses. So I think this category is cool to explore the whole game, but I think any percent is a little bit more challenging right now, except for the fact that this category is really long. But yeah, gamers, that's the second dungeon, and if you'll notice, my practice definitely paid off because of my splits. I'm minus 1 minute and 31 seconds, and I was plus 7 minutes earlier. So I've literally saved 8.5 minutes on my PB, which we're almost at the point where like I probably would have had the world record if I didn't lose those 7 minutes earlier. It's just pretty nuts to me because this is basically like a test run to see if my practice like was good or effective. Anyway, guys, Darunia's Cavern is up next. This is actually probably my favorite Dark World dungeon. It's really fun and fast. It's actually kind of modeled after Zelda 1. The music is from Zelda 1. Some of the room layouts are like distinctly copied from Zelda 1, coming up here in a second. Yeah, right here, this is like the first boss in Zelda 1. You have to do this Armos fight in Darunia's Cavern. This Armos fight like makes or breaks your split here. You need to kill these guys, and you have 2 turrets attacking you. Now you do have 20 arrows, and if you do these arrows correctly, you can get pretty fast, efficient, quick kills. So I was able to get a pretty decent fight here in my PB. Now there is one consideration here. If you go to the right side of the screen, there is a full heart container. Getting that full heart container respawns the Armos in the previous room, and you have to actually get it. So it loses a ton of time to do that. So I opted to skip it here, and I went north. Now if you go north, the Armos don't spawn on the screen. For some reason in Darunia's Cavern, these Armos spawn here, and what they do is they leave the screen and they go to the bottom screen. And that's in order to kill them on the bottom screen. So it's like this really interesting puzzle. If you re-enter the screen later, they always respawn. I actually said something really funny in my stream. I said, unless we die here randomly, we're good. Hopefully I don't randomly die, but oh my god. Literally as I said it, I died. I didn't even know you could die like this. This is crazy. Yeah, apparently there's an eye laser on the far right wall, and I like looked at him. Yeah, right here I looked at him. I'm looking for a fairy drop because I wanted to catch the fairy in my net to make the run at the end of the run, Ganon and Parallel Tower much safer. And I didn't get a fairy, I did get a heart, but I just randomly died. That's my 5th death of the run. Now, this dungeon is really straightforward after that, but it's really cool actually. I still think this is like probably the most fun dungeon in the speedrun, or it's easily top 2 or top 3. You get to do the sick dash later on. I'm not sure how you're supposed to get up there normally, but you can just dash up there, which is really cool. I also opt to do 2 hovers on the screen. You don't have to do these hovers, but if you know anything about hovering, you barely have to hover here. So the way hovering works is you pretty much you can stop hovering right when you touch the tile, and you start to fall off the tile. But if you just hold the direction, you don't fall off the tile. So pretty much my hover ends right about here. I actually don't need to hover anymore, but I continue to hover. This is the second one right here. I don't even know if hovering saves time on this because you can just dash through it, but I do it anyway because it's pretty fun. But yeah, here's the second boss, and you pretty much just dash through him with full magic with the Cane of Burna. Like, there's absolutely no risk on this at all. The third dungeon is Ruto's Fortress, and this dungeon is probably the worst. I don't even think it's that bad, but it's just really annoying. The first room is this big ice room, and pushing a statue on ice is kind of a neat mechanic, like actually speedrunning it, but I think everybody thinks this room sucks. Like, it's really dumb. Anyway, eventually you get the statue over to this switch, and then you have to go to the right side. You get hit by the spike always, which is pretty cool. And then we're out of the room. That was a really fast room for me. So this was actually another gold split. There's not much to say here. Pushing this statue on the switch is way worse than the first one because of all the lag and the enemies. And this happens right here like pretty often where you get stuck, and the lag is just insane. Like, this room is pretty stupid. The first one actually is kind of fun, but this one's like brutal. Another really fun fact in Parallel Worlds, so when you're pulling these switches right here, you can actually dash in the middle of the switch. In the first dungeon, you'll see me do that if you watch my stream. But on this screen, if you do that, the game soft locks, so you actually don't dash here until after it starts blowing up. And the reason for that is because if you notice the top wall, it's exploding. And for some reason, the game, if you exit the screen and the exploding doesn't finish, the game, it gets stuck in the exploding and you can't pause. This room's pretty silly, and this actually happens again later on. Yeah, so we're at the Cold Stair room, and you notice Cold Stair's ice is falling from the top. Cold Stair's actually on the right screen. He's not on this screen. And that ice that's falling from the top, if it falls on this screen and it doesn't finish falling and then you defeat Cold Stair, you can't pause until the boss is over. Well, unfortunately, these ice pellets that are falling right now on my screen, they count as the boss. So this ice right here, it's going to fall after I defeat the boss, and you'll see this right now. So right here, when I enter this room, the ice pellets finish falling. Then I can actually pause my game. I can't pause my game in the previous screen. So if you're not paying really careful attention to that, it's like really tricky. This took me about 20 minutes of practice to just figure out that, like, wait a minute, why can't I pause? Like, why did I soft lock? Because I'm trying to get a world record. I can't run into these random soft locks. The Parallel World actually has surprisingly quite a few random soft locks. Anyway, the boss, again, is really trivial. This one's actually pretty funny because at the bottom, the door doesn't close. You can actually just leave this boss, but there's like no risk at all. The next dungeon is pretty funny. You have to get this big bomb, and you actually take this big bomb and you blow up a wall, and it gets you into a dungeon. Now, this next dungeon, in my opinion, is probably the funniest because I think there was a major oversight, and you can skip pretty much the entire dungeon. This dungeon is aptly named Nibiru's Hole, and you pretty much just walk into holes the entire dungeon. Here's one right here, go to the left. Here's another hole, and of course another hole here. Well, the thing is, on the last hole, you can just bonk over the pit. I don't know if this is like intended or not. If you go into that hole, you pretty much get stuck, so I'm not sure what the actual design of this is, but the dungeon ended up being like a minute long. Like, okay, that's not... I can't imagine that was actually intentional. This is the third Helmsley fight, and this is actually another boss that I would say is kind of difficult. You can't just use Cane of Burna and like end the fight immediately. So I think this is kind of neat. Okay, guys, so the next dungeon is called Sheik's Hideout, and Sheik's Hideout's really sick. Like, for speedrunning, this dungeon is insanely cool. I highly recommend it. I think casually it might be kind of difficult or like really confusing, but the speedrun of this is amazing. Like, I'm kind of liking this one more than Darunia's Cavern for which dungeon is the coolest. The fact that this dungeon is at the end of near the end of the game as well, I think is just an advantage to how sick it actually is. One nice thing about it that we do in the speedrun that we don't have to worry about casually is every single time you enter this dungeon, you have to go to the right side. Well, first you have to get the key, but you have to enter this warp right here. This is every single time you enter the dungeon. So I think casually it might be really confusing, but in the speedrun we know what to do. So it ends up just being cool rooms, a lot of really cool mechanics, good dashing. Like, it just ends up being really sick. Anyway, the way this dungeon works is there's actually a switch to my far left. So if we fast forward past this screen and the next eye laser screen, which I can't imagine how you do this stuff without the Cane of Burna, but I know you can. Or I'm pretty sure you can, but I'm not even sure how. You got to hit that switch. That switch is like integral for the entire dungeon. So I think, again, casually, this is probably a nightmare. Because if you die or you mirror or you get lost, that switch will reset. That's the only switch in the dungeon. So you have to notice we hit that switch and then progress with the dungeon. Well, in the speedrun, I mean, since we know what we're doing, it ends up being a lot more like friendly. And it actually, the mechanics and the dashing mechanics are so cool. This room right here and the next few rooms are like some of the best rooms feeling in the entire game. Like, I think this dungeon is just incredible. This screen right here is so sick. You actually get to use the cane, and then you don't want to pull your bombs out because your cane will disappear. You got to throw the bomb here and then pull the cane out, and you can actually get a frame perfect dash because you can be in the bomb explosion. That's something you don't see in regular Link to the Past. I like to see that in ROM hacks. Like, that's actually cool to me. You get to do it again right here, and since your hearts don't really matter in any of these dungeons, you can kind of just walk into everything and go as fast as you can, which I do kind of miss playing regular Link to the Past. Regular Link to the Past, you want to play kind of safe or like actually keep track of your hearts. In this game, it hardly matters. Like, the first 5 or 6 splits, yeah, it's a big deal, but after that, it's irrelevant. Anyway, there's another pretty funny soft lock in Sheik's Hideout. In this screen, you have to intentionally go down until you see this bottom wall. What that does is it locks the screen in position. When you dash up here, If you don't do that, this screen will keep scrolling, and then you get stuck in the next hallway, and you have to mirror out, which means you have to go hit the switch and go all the way back over here. So make sure to go down there if you ever play this game casually or speedrun it. But yeah, the final boss is not really much to mention. You pretty much just use the Cane of Burna and slash him until he dies. So the next dungeon is actually Impa's Ways. And this dungeon is really funny because right at the start you can hover and then do a screen transition, and this skips a significant amount of the dungeon. So the dungeon actually ends up being really short, and the boss isn't particularly difficult. It's probably the hardest Burna fight, but it's not very difficult. Anyway, after maneuvering this maze where you can barely see the floor tiles, and usually the warp tiles, like the actual warp on them, is way different than what visually it looks like. We go fight Moldorm, and Moldorm's pretty funny because the tiles, there's a tile room in this, the tiles fall, there's 4 turrets, and sometimes Moldorm will actually get stuck on the outside, and it's like the fight's way harder. You almost saw it there. Fortunately, I didn't get it, so I saved a lot of time. But yeah, after that, we just do Parallel Tower and then Ganon. So we've already seen Parallel Tower and Ganon, but I wanted to show you guys some funny stuff that I didn't know about Parallel Tower in the All Dungeons run. Because in any percent, the any percent run, the Parallel Tower is slightly different. Also, I made this like ridiculous error at the start of the run. This is so funny. I decided to just suicide because I would refill my hearts, but I forgot I had a fairy. So I just like wasted my time and then suicided and then burned my fairy for nothing. This is so funny. Yeah, one big thing I learned is you don't actually have to kill Moldorm on this, because we don't need to go to the left, so you can just bomb the wall. I was killing Moldorm in all my previous runs. This is like my 5th run of this category. You can just go through the wall, because that was a huge time save not doing that. The other really big one is that on this screen, you can just hookshot the key and then leave the screen. I was actually hovering down to get the key and then walking into the floor. Which like, is really difficult and loses a ton of time. So those were like 2 huge time saves that I just really completely missed out on. Good thing I watched the world record and the route demonstration test just in case to find some strats I wasn't aware of. Parallel Tower was pretty funny. Not only did I have the problem at the start, but I tried hovering here. Now keep this in mind. I fall on this hover. I didn't fail the technique. I actually thought I was on the ground, and so I just stopped hovering. Yeah, I actually didn't fail the technique there. I legit thought it was already on the land. Unfortunately, you don't take damage, you fall, and then you have to redo the Armos fight and then redo about 25 different screens. So that loses 3 minutes, so I actually lost a bunch of time here. But yeah, if you're paying attention to my splits, I'm minus like 10 minutes on my PB with like a really terrible run. Earlier I was plus 7 minutes. Now I'm minus 9 minutes, and I just lost 3 minutes. Overall, the run ended being a 2:08:53, where I was minus 7 minutes. I literally lost 7 minutes on this run. Like this run without the beginning mistake would have been almost world record, like plus 30 on world record, with a 3-minute time loss in Ganon's Tower, with a death in Darunia's Cavern. Like that's insane. With doing my like first run after practice, like that's nuts to me. 100% chance I'm getting world record in this category within 2 or 3 days. Like I think I'm gonna do it today. I decided to do a second run, and I was minus 6 minutes in Din's Catacombs. I'm feeling pretty confident to get world record. And the run wasn't very good actually at this point. Minus 625. Well, last run I was plus 654. So I'm actually like down like 30 seconds. This room I bonked in, which means you take damage. And then this is why this is so hard. I can't just dash through. I actually got pretty lucky here that it didn't die, but right there, that's really way above I would expect a casual player's ability to execute. So yeah, this split right here was nowhere near as good. I made so many mistakes in Dragor's Castle and on the item split though. I'm only minus 5 minutes, which again is like easily world record pace still, but I did lose like 3 minutes, which kind of bummed me out. I ended up bleeding more time on the next few splits as well, and this split wasn't very good. Now I was saying Saria's Gardens is probably the hardest split in this game because, or in Darkhold at least, because you have to actually manage your hearts and magic throughout the whole dungeon. Well, my run unfortunately died here. I was pretty unhappy with this run, and I was running into another problem as well that I was kind of talking about on stream. My D-pad for my controller is starting to break, and I don't like playing this game with a broken controller. Now, this is obviously not my D-pad, but I made a critical error here, and you're going to be like, what is this error? So I need to switch to turn blue, and I'm about to exit the room, and you'll notice the switch is not blue, it's red. And like, how did the switch get red? I'm not sure what happens here. This actually happened one other time in my runs, but for some reason, if you pause while that bomb's blowing up, it'll hit the switch twice, which is like, what the heck? That is so frustrating. So I'm gonna have to change how I do this screen, because this run still could have been a world record even without this critical error. And guys, if you mess that up right there, your run's pretty much over, because you can just throw another 2 bombs down there, Unfortunately, I didn't have 2 bombs left, which means there's basically nothing I can do here. You can't actually go back and hit that switch. I think you normally need the boomerang, which I don't have the boomerang, right? So there's pretty much nothing I can do here. Yeah, I ended up just suiciding, and then I had to go back through the entire dungeon, go hit that switch again with 2 bombs. I was able to get it right the second time, and I think I'm going to pause like super late intentionally so that never happens again. But unfortunately, we're in Darunia's Cavern, and I literally lost, it looks like about 6.5 minutes in Saria's Garden. So 2 runs now that I've lost about 6.5 minutes in like a few splits. Pretty unfortunate. Anyway, I was able to capitalize on the parallel tower time save. I saved 3 minutes and 40 seconds there, which is ridiculous. Like looking at my splits, that's insane. But that's pretty huge because I still PB'd on this run. Yeah, I got a 206.51, which is pretty dope. So I PB'd twice today. Both of them are easily world recordable. These are like warm-up runs or like test runs to test out the route because I'm kind of like, I practice a bunch and I don't know what's going to work and what doesn't work. And they're both like easily hit a world record. This one easily would have been world record without that one error. So I'm pretty excited. But yeah, actually I was talking about my controller. I've been having a lot of controller issues lately, and I'm going to actually experiment with fixing this. I found some pretty crazy fixes. Okay guys, this is the controller I use. So what's the issue with this controller? Well, it's not actually the controller that matters. It's the inside of the controller that matters. This is called a D-pad membrane. This is what matters for the controller. Pretty much in my experience, all the controller parts do add together and they all like seem to matter in their own way. But this individually has more value than everything else in the controller. This is like the entire controller is this D-pad membrane. Now there's tons of different types of D-pad membranes online. There's this red one. This is actually not even first party. Then there's this black one I get from Sweden. And then there's this one. I think I got this from Amazon. The things about these, they all look the same, but they like radically different in runs. This D-pad membrane, it doesn't even function. Like this is literally unplayable. And I don't mean that it's bad. The left and right inputs will both press down at the same time in a run. And when you do that, Link starts moonwalking backwards. It's actually a banned glitch in the game because you can't do that on a regular SNES controller. There's no way to press both left and right. Like you can't press both. You can press one and you can press the other because there's a ball bearing in the middle. Now, why would a D-pad affect a ball bearing? I'm not actually sure, but I think it's because the rubber is so terrible that what happens is it just, there's no, like you can easily just press 2 down for some reason. Well, that's kind of the problem with buying replacement D-pads online. You have no idea what you're getting. They all look the same or pretty similar, and they're all radically different in actual gameplay. I need a rubber that's really stiff, and that's why I usually use these black ones from Sweden. Problem with these black ones from Sweden, they're also third party, and they're also made of really terrible material. The stiffness of these rubbers is actually perfect. It's exactly what I'm looking for. They're really stiff. You get perfect control over Link. Like, it's really nice. Problem is the actual material that they make these with breaks down very quickly. The last time I had one of these, I actually got world record in Link to Past, no major glitches, and for about 2 weeks, it was amazing. Like, I was playing incredible. This is amazing. I was like, feel like really thriving with it. I got tons of really low 123s. I had multiple my best run ever. I got tons of gold splits. Like, it was incredible. And then the material like instantly broke. And what happens actually on the contact point, between the contact point and the top, there's this like meshing material that actually like tears because you constantly press it down. It'll actually start to tear. And when that tears, you lose grip, it loosens up, and you're not able to properly move Link. So I think that's actually happening to my current controller right now, and the actual rubber is starting to tear, and then it becomes really loose. When it becomes really loose, I have a really hard time playing. So I actually think my controller is breaking right now, which like really sucks. We're on Parallel Worlds. Tomorrow is actually day 13. Well, we're about that 2-week mark where these things start to break. So fortunately, these are really cheap. I have 7 of them. I have another 4 in my closet. I'm just going to throw another one of these in when these break. But that's not really functional for trying to get good world records in Link to the Past, because the problem with these rubbers is that the beginning and the end period of me playing them is not very good, and they barely last any time at all. So I'm not really going to get good, high quality, long-term gameplay. And for me to be competitive in Link to the Past, it's not a good idea. Like that's not viable. So I actually went to Amazon and I bought 2 third-party controllers that I'm just hoping they work. I actually don't think they will, but there's a small chance. Okay, so I bought 2 different third-party controllers. The first one was this 8BitDo SN30 Bluetooth gamepad for the Nintendo Switch. Yeah, so the reason I bought this is because if you actually look at the controller, it's modeled pretty similar to a SNES controller. I've actually heard that the D-pads are really stiff, and I even watched a video of a guy take one apart, and the D-pad membrane is almost identical to a SNES membrane. So I'm guessing that the D-pad membrane in this, I could put into my SNES controller. This is an odd shot if it actually works or not. But I've heard that these controllers, the company has put a lot of effort into them. They actually care about the controllers. So I'm guessing it's actually probably pretty decent. Also, worst case, it'll work well with my Switch that I don't actually use. So, worst case, we at least have a controller for this. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching my run recap of Parallel Worlds All Dungeons. We're going to get Parallel Worlds All Dungeons World Record, the Light World World Record, and the Hundo World Record pretty soon. So I actually don't know what game I'm going to run next for the Link to Pass World Record goals. I want to run NMG and regular Link to Pass categories at some point in the future. But I want to get this controller issue resolved first because I hate playing Link to the Past with a bad controller. It's so frustrating. So I want to get that resolved first. So post in the comments what game you want to see me run next. If you guys have something in mind, I'm definitely going to move on to something else, probably in like 4 or 5 days maximum. But yeah, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, over the past several days, I've gotten a lot of support on Twitch, so I wanted to give a big shout outs to the people making this video possible. Big shout outs to Zazzojo for the 1-bit, Moonar for Twitch Prime subscription, Zazzojo for the 10 bits, Tuna1 Alpha Gamer resubscribed tier 1 for 10 months. Hi Dad, I love you. We need merch with the new name on it. I hit affiliate last night. Also PogChamp. Dockerty for the 11 bits, Dockerty for the 4 bits, Dockerty for the 14 bits. Teen Sauce resubscribed tier 1 for 5 months in a row, 8 total. Good morning, dude. Good luck with the runs. Sammy resubscribed tier 1 for 12 months in a row, 12 total. Epic. Tommy Lee resubscribed tier 1 for 15 months. Sup. Sloppy Dude resubscribed tier 1 for 29 months. Zazzojo donated 10 bits. Also, really big shout out to my 6 Patreons for helping me with $65 per month. I really appreciate that. Patreon is mostly to support me, but we do have a Discord. Make sure to post in there if you're interested. And also, it is technically about gameplay philosophy, natural gameplay. So if you're interested in that, head over there and let's create the discussion.